Welcome to Two-Way Tonight, everybody. This is March 21st, 2024, 25, 26, 25. I'm Mark Halperin, your host for Two-Way Tonight. Some call me an anchor, some call me your spiritual guru, your guide, your last resort when you're looking for something to do. Thank you for being part of the Two-Way community, which is gathered here to talk about the news of the day one last time before we turn to the weekend and madness ensues men's basketball. Uh, Thank you for watching. As I said, if you're in the two-way platform, we'd love to get your questions. Jack Desmond's already got his hand up. Follow his example. Raise them high and proud if you want to ask a question on the two-way platform. If you're watching on YouTube or X, don't raise your hand. Don't put smack in the chat. Thank you for watching. Glad to have you here and use your high human intelligence to figure out how to watch on this platform. People often ask me, how do I watch on the platform itself? Go to my Substack and sign up there. Wide World of News. You'll get a daily email or two with links to join all the programs on the Substack on the two-way platform, or go to twoway.tv and sign up there to receive our award-winning newsletter. And when I say award-winning, I mean it hasn't won any awards yet, but I think it will eventually. Those are the two ways to get the magic key, the golden ticket to join here. In addition, I recommend to you the David Bonson's newsletter, Dividend Cafe. And I do that in part because David is a sponsor of the program and a great friend and a brilliant guy. And you ever notice there are no ads on this show? Unless you're watching on YouTube, when occasionally there are. But David Bonson's Dividend Cafe is a daily newsletter about the economy that I read every day, and I recommend you do also. David is accessible and sophisticated, something that, if you want to deal with the economy, are great things to be. You can sign up for the newsletter by going to the Dividend Cafe. Just Google that, it'll come right up. Or you can go to twoway.tv/TBG, the Bonson Group, TBG. You'll see a link to sign up. I recommend it to you. It is a wonderful way to understand what's going on in the economy now, where all of this uncertainty reigns. All of this uncertainty reigns. And when I have economic questions, if I don't find them in Dividend Cafe, I'm lucky enough to be able to bring David on the show and ask him myself. But you can read it for free, and I recommend that you do if you're interested in what's going on in the economy and its intersection with all the politics that's going on both here and abroad. Thank you very much for your attention. Again, please sign up for the Dividend Cafe. And if you like this show, you can help me by signing up because I want David to do well. And if David does well, I do well. So please, if you enjoy this program, I urge you, sign up for the Dividend Cafe newsletter from the great folks at the Bonson Group. The Bonson Group for more than 250 years. Well, they're not that old, but I recommend it to you. All right. Our guest today, is our guest here? Yes, he is. Our guest today is so smart that's a little intimidating. I'm going to pretend I'm not intimidated, but I am. This man is a genius. His name is Eli Lake. Eli Lake. And he is going to guide us through the news. And there's two stories in particular. I want to start with Mr. Lake. But first, I want to welcome you back to Two Way after you unmute and thank you for being part of what we do here.
Oh, I mean, what a great intro. Thank you so much. And I love two-way. And I know you just brought on a great friend of mine, Michael Moynihan, who is terrific. And it's a great
He's,
platform. And I love
thank
what you're doing with it. It is kind of just it's taking the bitter emotions, the kind of partisan blindness out of politics. And it's like the country really needs it. So I really appreciate what you do, Mark.
Thank you, sir. Very kind of you. Eli Lake writes for the Free Press. Barry Weiss's operation has a bunch of great people, including Eli. My friend Neil Ferguson writes there, another
He's
brilliant guy.
he's great.
And Nellie Bowles' Friday column is a laugh a minute or more, maybe three laughs a minute. And Eli, you also host Breaking History podcast. Tell folks what that's about and where they can read it or listen
Well, the
to it, rather.
Breaking History podcast is through the Free Press. And what we do is every other week, we have a very tight 40 to 50 minute narrative podcast where we bring in real experts and journalists and historians, and we look at something that is in the news conversation, and we then also and then we tell a story that we feel from history that helps illuminate that. And the kind of idea is like, well, there's very few things that are totally new and unprecedented. So usually we've been here before. Our first one was called Trump's Populist Moment, and it was about the rise of Andrew Jackson, who was our first populist president. And the latest one, which I'm really proud of, is the story of Luigi Mangione and how he has been celebrated by many Americans, even though it appears that at least he is alleged to have murdered Brian Thompson by shooting him in the back. And we compare his story to another person who, pardon the expression, was as part of the phenomenon of breaking rad, Ulrike Meinhof, who was a really prominent West German journalist, an important journalist, and she ended up kind of helping to form her own terrorist group and became West Germany's most notorious terrorist. And so that's the episode. I recommend it. I do. I write the script. I write my own AI songs for it, including the interstitial music, and we have great guests. And we could use your support. So please check it out and subscribe.
What day does it drop?
Every other Wednesday. The latest one came out on this Wednesday. The next one will be in about a week and a half.
All right. And is there a way for people to sign up to get notifications to know when it's going to come out and who's on?
Well, if you sign up for the free press, that's actually a very good idea that we should maybe tell people what's coming. That's noted. We don't do that yet. We just started, but if you sign up for the free press, you'll be able to find out this, when it comes out, and if you get it, we're on Apple, Spotify, and all the major platforms.
Eli also has a hyper sophisticated X game. I recommend you
I'll
follow
try
him.
it.
Follow him there if you don't. All right, I want to start. The president talked at the White House today. He did an event with the Secretary of Defense, and he talked on all manners of topics, and we'll get to that probably, maybe not. I want to start with two related stories that just have me gobsmacked, and
Mm.
it takes a lot to surprise me, anything related to Donald Trump. But the bending of the knee by Columbia University, which is breaking tonight after long conversations. This has been long forecast that Columbia was going to give in to the demands of the president to change their policies in a range of ways in order to keep their federal funding. There you see the Wall Street Journal headline. Um, but also a story we discussed at some length this morning on the morning meeting, which is Paul Weiss, the law firm. Also, these are two private entities, one that receives a great deal of federal funding, and I think that's where they were threatened. One who clearly felt that the president could use his leverage to destroy the law firm, both giving in. Now, it'll be interesting to see what other universities do, what other white shoe law firms do. And there's no doubt that the analysis by Republicans that those kinds of entities, major universities and white shoe law firms, have been a huge political benefit to the left, and that they, in the case of the law firms and the president's view correctly, helped to try to send him to prison. I just love you to talk about if you agree with me that this is a huge deal symbolically, that and it's a shocking turn that has implications for our society. I just love you to put in perspective, historical perspective and political, societal perspective. How big a deal do you think these two things are and why?
Well, I think Colombia is enormous. There has been kind of a slow motion, you could say, radicalization of some of these departments at these universities. I think there was a real double standard that was exposed after October 7th. Every group gets to say, this speech is making me feel unsafe. And that is enough for the school to shut it down, except for Jews after October 7th. That I think revealed a total, that was a disgrace. And there was there was a process. There were like serious lawsuits. The Department of Education under Biden, to credit him, had begun investigations. So there were things, but it wasn't really moving. And then Trump did something that no other president has done, which is to threaten hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding. And he basically gets results. And some of this is common sense stuff. But I would argue, I mean, in some ways, I don't, let's be realistic. That's not a great precedent because, well, I don't know. What if there's a Democratic president in 4 years or 8 years or wherever? And then they decide that they have a set of policy issues, and then they try to play the same card with the university. That's probably not a great situation, you don't necessarily want to say that. But I would also say that things had gone in one direction at Columbia and a lot of these elite schools for so long that I would say extraordinary action is necessary. And that's why I don't really have a problem with it. Whereas if you just asked me in the abstract, I would. On this Paul White thing, I guess in some ways, I totally agree. These white shoe law firms had kind of become very beneficial for the Democrats historically. The trial lawyers are supportive of that. I'm I don't like the idea of kind of individually targeting a law firm, even when I disagree with them. I think that I'm going to forget the name of the law, but it's like you can't pass a law in Congress that targets as just an individual. Again, every norm violated last time by the Democrats in terms of going after uh, the leader of the opposition party or a former president is an invitation to violate norms coming up. And this time, every norm violated by Trump, it's not going to be 100 years of Republicans. That's not how our country works. There is eventually going to be a counter reaction. And so that's why the rules that we all agree on kind of that's the incentive for keeping them in place. So in the case of Colombia, I'm not shedding any tears. In the other case, I think it sets a bit of a dangerous precedent. And you have to sort of think, what if it's President AOC? And you've just introduced that toolbox to her. And I just don't see that question being asked by the Trump White House enough, which is to think more long term. What do you think?
So my colleague Dan Turrentine
Yeah,
on the morning meeting said
yeah,
something that you said, which is, well, now Democrats not only might do this if they
mm-hmm.
when they retake the White House, but that it's going to be expected of Democratic presidential candidates to announce that they're if they get back in power, they will turn the tables. And the question I asked Dan is the question I'll ask you. What would a president, what kind of institutions would a president AOC target? Because the University of Alabama, not as liberal as Columbia, but it's no friend of the Republican Party in terms
Sure.
of so the faculty and et cetera. So what are the institutions? Because I'll tell you that embedded in my question, just in case it's not clear, is this is an asymmetry. There aren't institutions like that on the right that have been a bulwark of the right as compared to the universities, the law firms, the media, the Hollywood talent agencies, the Silicon Valley companies, the CEOs of major corporations. Now they could go after the Coke Industries. They could, but there aren't broad categories of companies or of organizations that are like the ones on the left that I see.
What
Am I
about
wrong?
Fox News? What about the Heritage Foundation? I mean, you can come up with people, you can come up with things. What I mean, or just if you look at it, I mean, first of all, we're in the middle of a lot of change at this point and flux and so forth. So you could say, well, what are the institutions that they're going to go after? But they will find a way to kind of normalize the idea of there's certainly law firms that work with Republicans. Why can't they do that? Why can't they do the same thing? Now, the argument on the other side is Democratic and Republican presidents used to do it. They just didn't put it in an executive order. So it was an understood, this firm is persona non grata because you represented this guy that we didn't like, and that's life in the big city. Um, but I don't know. I do think that it's a lot of power to put into the hands. There is a precedent here. It's not coming out of nowhere. That's where you and I think agree. Um, I think that this White House is responding to a lot of norm violations from the Biden years, and
Yeah,
when he was president the first time,
yeah,
and that's why they're cleaning house, as it were. But
yeah.
just be careful.
What's remarkable to me is our colleagues in the so-called dominant media, mainstream media, they won't even point out that this is a reaction to some extent to what went on, not just in the Biden years, but went on for decades.
Yeah,
And particularly in the last 4 years in targeting of Donald Trump. I mean, it doesn't justify what Donald Trump is doing, but if you're trying to be fair to voters and explain it, they barely will have a half paragraph pointing out the reasons all these things are being
yeah,
done. They're not made up. They're a reaction to specific things. If I were someone who a lawyer had tried to put me in prison and I had the power to try to push back on that, it's a pretty good chance I would. The Democrats. we've talked again on this program many times, vacuum of leadership.
Mm.
And in the last week, there have been various attempts to fill that vacuum, maybe the last couple of weeks. So Gavin Newsom in his podcast. Okay. NBC News is reporting that the Bidens, Jill and Joe Biden, have met with the Democratic officials and said, "We're ready to put us in back in, coach. We're ready to
Are you
raise
serious?
money.
Wow. Oh
Yes,
my God.
we're ready to raise money and do other things." Then another potential vacuum filler is AOC, who's on a tour out west with Bernie Sanders. Sam, number 9, please. Um, Here is AOC in Colorado at one of these Sanders AOC events.
And oligarchs will back his campaigns and bankroll those of his allies. They scratch his back and he scratches theirs. And all of us are left behind.
So that person shouted, "Bring back the guillotine." One other person this week who seems to be trying to fill the vacuum is someone who was moved from relative obscurity to national prominence. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who was put on the ticket with Kamala Harris when she ascended after Joe Biden stepped aside under pressure. And he's been making the rounds, doing all sorts of media appearances and seemingly positioning to be considered as someone who might run for president in 2028. Here is number 10, Sam, Donald Trump today in the Oval Office talking about his view of Tim Walz.
Walz is now saying about Trump supporters, and forgive me, I'm just reading a quote from Tim Walz. "I think I could kick most of their ass."
Oh boy, he'd be in trouble.
Is there any way to know?
Well, he's a loser. Yeah, I mean, he's a loser. He lost an election. He played a part. You know, usually a vice president doesn't play a part, they say. I think Tim played a part. I think he was so bad that he hurt her. But she hurt herself, and Joe hurt them both. They didn't have a great group, but I would probably put him at the bottom of the group.
So, Eli, what do you think of the vacuum that exists now, and what do you think of the various people who are trying to fill it?
Well, I defer on the, I mean, you're one of the best journalists in the world on politics, but my kind of rule of thumb is I don't know. I don't think we even know who the next Democrat's going to be at this point. I mean, we know some people who are going to put their hat in the ring, like a Josh Shapiro or somebody like that. But what we're going to have to sort of see how this goes, and it depends on what happens with the economy, and it depends on where voters are and what happens in the midterms. Because on the one hand, everybody seems to agree in the political class, including so many liberals now. We got to drop this woke stuff. We got to drop, know, you know, trans kids in sports and things like that. Fine, but what's your positive? Like, okay, fine, you're moving away from that. Great, but what are you gonna? What are you gonna say about the kind of new economic nationalism, the emphasis on tariffs? And it's possible that the tariffs are going to be an economic disaster, and inflation's going to get worse, and the economy is going to get worse. So at that point, I think that we have to look at what the economy is going to look like to figure out what kind of Democrat people are going to want. If we are in free fall, voters might want a familiar face in some ways, a steady hand, if they see that Trump's the chaos. If things are better than expected, then maybe you're going to see the party become Trumpier in some ways, in that there'll be more populist, but populist from the left. But I just think it's way too soon to tell. And I think that it's just, I mean, I understand why Tim Walz is doing it. And Gavin Newsom is a far more skilled politician in my view. And what he's doing politically is smart by having all these conservatives on his talk show. But I just can't see any of the old faces at this point. But again, I can't know the answer to that question until we know what the economy and the voter electorate looks like. It's quite possible that things are going too far, too fast, and we're going to be facing so many problems, and Trump's going to own it because of all that. And if that's the case, then it could just be anybody but Trump, right? And then at that point, you're just, then, or it could be, we've listened to the voters, the country is over here, and this is what we have to do. So I don't know, because I could see a far left kind of candidate, and I could also see somebody who is going to be Fetterman-like or Shapiro-like.
Just to be clear, I wasn't asking so much about 28
Yeah.
as I am about now.
Yeah.
Let me ask you it this way.
Sure.
Some of Trump's policies are clearly popular.
Yeah.
Okay. Some, like tariffs or Doge, I think they're popular with some people, not in others. Depends on how you ask people about them.
Yeah.
But I think if tariffs end up helping the U.S. economy, Trump thinks they will, they'll be popular. They aren't a priori unpopular. And Doge, if you say, do you want government to be smaller, more efficient, less waste, fraud, and abuse? Popular. If you say cutting programs for your family, not popular. But are there anything? What are things Trump is doing now that you think are without reservation unpopular?
Well, I want to go back to Doge and tariffs.
Hmm?
Doge and tariffs are big changes that he owns. So it's kind of almost irrelevant how popular they are now. When the Iraq war started,
Yeah,
it was really popular.
yeah,
Remember?
yeah.
It matters in a few years. And then if you look at and you say, wait a second, you did these new things and the economy's worse,
Well,
then Doge
but
and
but
tariffs are going to be really unpopular. And
right, but that goes.
if it turns
But
out that things are fine, then you're going to say, well, he did all this stuff and I was unsure, but then it's fine. So that's
but
that's
that
kind of
goes.
how
But
yeah,
yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you
yeah,
100%. And that goes to my point, which
yeah,
is if you're thinking about being a Democrat who's trying to fill the vacuum, and you're talking about attacking Trump or creating a contrast with Trump on things like tariffs and Doge, which
yeah.
are too soon to say, it doesn't seem to me that's filling a vacuum. What are the things that Democrats could say about Trump now, not where they're morally outraged,
Right.
but where they're actually on the right side of public opinion?
Hmm. That Trump's doing right now. I think actually some of the polling really surprised me on Ukraine and Zelensky, and I think that turned out to be less popular than I thought it would be. I was outraged by it, but um, I think that could be one area, not the way they were doing it before. I think actually it's funny when you ask that question. Now that I'm thinking out loud, I think the key is to just like moderate. Remember the phrase "to a point." So there could be a democratic message that was something like this. You know what? My party was wrong about the border. We let in too many people. We didn't have enforcement. But I think it's wrong to deport people when we don't even know their names and the way that he's doing it. Do you see where I'm coming from? Is that there's a way?
I do, but
Yeah.
I do, but that to me is
Hmm.
one where I don't know that Trump's position is unpopular. I think most people, I may be wrong, but I think most people would say not ideal, but we got to
Yeah.
close the border and we got to have a deterrence and we have to get bad hombres out of the country. The point of my question is
Yeah.
the point of my question is it's difficult for these people to fill the vacuum when,
Right.
as you said, well, it seems to me Trump's policies are largely in three categories. One is things that are popular,
Hmm.
things that we too soon to say,
Hmm.
and things that are unpopular that he's not really talking about. So, for instance, what are the two issues Democrats thought would win them the election in 2020, in 2024? Abortion and January 6th,
Right.
right? Those things aren't really being talked about now, right? They're Trump positions,
Right.
but you don't hear Democrats trying to fill the vacuum saying this guy's a threat to abortion rights and don't let him nominate another justice, or he's still, defending the J6ers and he pardoned them. Like you could imagine someone saying he pardoned those people, indiscriminately pardoned them, including people who beat up cops. He's not the law and order candidate, but you just don't hear that.
Right.
So I think that I said before, the media acts like all of Trump's positions are wildly unpopular and just far left MAGA red meat.
Hmm.
It's just not true. And the stuff like tariffs and Doge, they may end up being popular, they may end up being unpopular, but it's hard to see how to fill the vacuum now, as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't mean I'm saying what Trump's doing is great. It's just I don't hear Democrats finding a basket of things where they can say this guy's messing up.
But if you're a Democrat and you feel really strongly that Trump's theory of the case when it comes to tariffs is all wrong, and historically it leads to higher prices for consumer goods, which is true. Why wouldn't you just position yourself now knowing that the election is in 2 years for the midterms? What I'm saying is, yeah, it's not popular today, but you're not running now. But instead, you can stake out that position, and that gives you more authenticity when the rest of the country might take a look and say, wait a second, the price of eggs went up even more.
Well, takes a skillful politician to make the pro free trade argument.
Yeah. And also, let me just ask you this. Is it the issue right now for Democrats, or do they need somebody who can communicate that doesn't sound like they're just constantly reacting in hyperbole mode? What I mean by that is maybe the best thing that Democrats could find is just somebody who sounds like, I agree with this. This is good up to a point, but I draw the line here. And maybe that appeals because that's a real contrast to the political discourse in, the last few years in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's a shrewd point.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the economy. We'll lead into it, number 13, Sam, by talking about the markets.
Okay.
Um, Tariffs are roiling elites, and there's certainly lots of people on the street who are bothered by it. Markets, you can see there, we're up today. That's brought to you by our friends at the Bonson Group, sponsor of this program. Um, I'm kind of consumed with this question that I've raised before, and it draws from a line that John McCain was much derided for in 2008, when amidst the financial crisis, he said, kind of defending the Republican economy under the man who was trying to succeed George W. Bush of his party, the fundamentals of the economy are strong. The tariffs are roiling people. The uncertainty about whether there are tax cuts coming, the question of what impact Doge will have on the economy. In your view, are the fundamentals of the economy strong? Why? Why not?
Okay, can I plead some Socratic ignorance because I know enough about economics to know how much I need to know more? And I say that because I respect economists so much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My sense is that the fundamentals of our economy are strong because we're a great open society. But this is one of those areas where I would defer to somebody else.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough.
Okay.
Going to bring in your folks in just a minute to ask questions. If you'd like to get into the conversation with me and with Eli Lake, please raise your hand, and we'd love to get you in. All right. The president today talked about January 6th in the Oval Office regarding his view of the people who are attacking Tesla owners and Tesla dealers. Sam, this is number one, please.
These people as terrorists, just like others. When I looked at those showrooms burning and those cars, not one or two, like 7, 8, 10 burning, exploding all over the place. These are terrorists. You didn't have that on January 6th, I can tell you. You didn't have anything like that on January 6th, which is sort of amazing because on January 6th, the Democrats were talking. Nobody was killed other than a very beautiful young woman, Ashley Babbitt. Nobody was killed. And you look at what's going on now with these terrorists. These are terrorists, and that's an organized event. Take a look at their signs. Take a look. They're all made by the same sign company. A nice, expensive job. Now, these are the people that finance it are, in my opinion, in just as big a trouble as the people that are setting the match and setting the fires. So we'll see. It's under very serious investigation by the FBI and by the Justice Department. These people are terrorists.
I hate to turn things into media stories, Eli, because I think there's too much focus on that, but I'm just baffled by the coverage, which treats it as kind of a curiosity.
It is terrorism, by the way. He's absolutely right.
Well,
100%.
that's right,
I mean, that's. I'm glad the Justice Department, and the FBI is investigating it. That's classic terrorism.
I agree with you, and we're not pro Trump. We have eyes and ears. How could the press, for the most part, not be covering this as a massive story of terrorism that is unambiguous?
That I am baffled by. It is. This is the turn. I mean, listen, I don't know the second part of what he said. I have no idea who's funding it. The part about the signs, maybe. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's definitely acts of terrorism, and it happened in more than one place. So it seems like it was coordinated. The bat signal went out. I don't know if it's decentralized or not. I agree with you. I cannot understand why that's not a bigger story. And you got to ask the question, if this wasn't Elon Musk's company that was being targeted, and let's say, I don't know, it was, a similar kind of thing, I don't know, against Disney, let's say, the media would be all over it, and there would be a whole bunch of stories about, the new threat of domestic terrorism, the new right, and the climate of hate, and so forth.
and an obsession of getting to the bottom of who is doing it.
Yeah, I agree. It's
All right.
that is I and that by the way, that is to the media's discredit. And it's like I'm one of the reasons you're flourishing at two-way is because these are the stories that need to be covered and they're not doing it.
All right. One last one, I think.
Okay.
Something else occurs to me. Elon Musk's conflict of interests are staggering.
Yes.
And I think that if he wants to stay in this job, he should basically just cancel all his government contracts. He should just say, I'm not going to make any more money off the federal government until I'm out of this job.
Or put his holdings in a blind trust, which
Or
is what
put his
people
holding
used
in
to
a
do.
blind trust,
Right.
or disclose a lot more than he has, right?
Yeah.
Disclose all of it. That's just obvious.
Yep.
And yet the Democrats and the media and the watchdog groups seem powerless to force that, in part because Trump and Musk are just impervious to scrutiny or norms or whatever.
No, it's
Again,
also because of
yeah,
Russiagate, and it's because of Sharp is attacked. Joe Biden's fine. What are you talking about? It's
yes,
because of a series of.
I,
It's
I,
because there's no evidence it came from the
yeah,
lab in
yeah,
Wuhan.
yeah,
You can
I
go
agree.
through the list, and the media has just lost the ability
Yeah,
to have that power. Because
but
if this was 2017, this would be huge, and there would be that kind of pressure.
well, I credit all those points, but
Yeah,
it's not just the media, right? The Democrats
yeah,
should be
yeah,
doing
yeah.
something about it. Interest groups, there should be some honest Republicans who demand it.
Yep.
So the question I have is, given the history, given Trump's imperviousness to, such niceties, like what can we do to fix that? What can we do to force him Musk to take one of those steps, either divestiture or canceling of the contracts, blind trust, or at least disclosure? Like if you could convene a meeting of everybody and say we need this to change, what could be done?
Well, um, it's a great question. I don't really have a good answer. The one thing I would say is that we need to have a new. I mean, one of the things we think of as sort of the free press is that we like to think that we would like to be the new place where we have a kind of authority with this new audience of there are millions of Americans who've given up and have lost broken trust with the traditional media. It starts with the media and it starts with regaining the credibility of the media. And that's where and then I think the other things then follow, like these other interest groups. But a lot of these groups were just kind of started at 11 with Trump in his first term. So it's very difficult. Like once you do have a real conflict of interest, something that's really serious, it is a little bit of a,
Yeah,
boy who cried wolf situation. So you kind of have to rebuild those institutions. I know that's a terrible answer because
yeah,
we got the problem right now, but that's
yep,
the beginning of kind of the long-term way to fix it.
yeah. Um, I say with respect, great answer. Actually, I think the only possible answer that's right. I say with respect, and you all regular viewers know I don't read the chat, but occasionally I glance at it. You people who say I have Trump derangement syndrome because I'm concerned about Elon Musk's conflict of interest, I say with respect and the presumption of grace, you're out of your minds. You're out of your minds. I this morning I condemned the president for acting like a mobster for threatening Paul Weiss, and I talked like Sean Spicer about the decades of abuse by liberal law firms of their power on pro bono, etc. Okay? You all need in this country people who are willing to call out both sides because both sides do bad things. It's not about false equivalency. It's not about partisanship. And it's certainly not about you're selectively listening to what I say. There's just no basis to say that I've got Trump derangement syndrome or to say what's wrong with Mark. If you can't see the conflict that Elon Musk has, unprecedented. The man has millions of dollars in government contracts. He's not disclosing how he's making the money from the government. He's making decisions that could easily affect his business. There's no disclosure about what these contracts are. There's no blind trust. If that doesn't bother you, I don't care how pro MAGA you are, if that doesn't bother you, you're not paying attention to your responsibility as citizens. It doesn't mean you don't love Trump. It doesn't mean you like Joe Biden. It doesn't mean you'd rather watch Rachel Maddow than Sean Hannity. You have to focus here on what we're trying to do. We're trying to talk about things in a serious way and to say the right things regardless of partisanship. It's outrageous what Elon Musk is doing on this issue. I'm not saying I'm against Doge. I'm not saying he shouldn't be able to work in the government. I'm saying the absence of disclosure or recusal, they say he's recusing on some things, but we don't know, is it's just wrong. It's morally wrong. It's bad policy, and it shouldn't happen. And the fact that, as Eli correctly points out, that people in my business have cashiered their credibility for over decades, particularly in the last 4 years, when they engaged in a cover up of collusion with the Biden White House to keep the truth from coming out fully about Joe Biden's mental decline. They've cashiered the capacity to put any pressure on the White House by putting a spotlight on it. Now, do you think I have Trump derangement syndrome when I say a collusion of 4 years of conspiracy? Is that someone with Trump derangement syndrome? I'm a little bit personally bothered when you guys say that, but I'm more troubled by what this means for the country. That you come to this platform to hear sophisticated, nuanced conversations that try to put every powerful interest under the spotlight. And you cannot listen for 4 paragraphs. All you can hear is when I say things that you don't like about Donald Trump. It's madness. It's madness. All right, enough of that. All right, Eli, thank you for joining. Let's
Thank
bring
you.
in let's bring in folks to ask questions. Eli, you don't know Clara probably. Clara has been one of our great community members from the get-go. Clara, need you to unmute, fix your camera, lower the camera, unmute. Clara lives in the Washington, D.C. area, unless she's moved. She hadn't been on in a while. I hope that doesn't mean there's been any dislocation in her life. Clara, are you able to unmute? Try one more time. She's been raising her hand lately, and we're glad to have her back. Let's see. One more time, Clara. Are you able to unmute? All right. Clara's going to keep working on that. And while she does, we're going to bring in Mr. Reynolds Saunders. Reynolds, welcome in. You unmute. Clara's still working on it. There you go. Clara, stand by.
Can you hear
Keep
me?
working on it. Yes, sir. We tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
So I'm from Columbus, Georgia. So I got two topics. I'll talk about Musk in a second. But the first one is you're talking about how Trump is going after the law firms. I think he needs to broaden out his scope. I think, the Republicans have an opportunity to really go after the Democratic Party and really put them in a tizzy. So one of the areas I think Republicans can go after them. I know in the Electoral College in 2020, from reports I remember, they overstated some states like maybe New York and California by 2 electoral states. So hopefully, I don't know if you could take that to court, but if Pam Bondi or someone in the Attorney General's office could go to court and try to get those district California and New York, I think they said up to like 6 or 7 overstatements, and that's about the state of Nevada. You could put in, I think Georgia should have gotten an extra one where I'm from. North Carolina should have gotten an extra one. Florida should have gotten 2 more in 2020, and Texas should have got 2 more. So I don't know if they could go and sue to try to overturn some of that information. But also, I think the Republicans, the election will be won in 2 years from now on the economy. So another area in which the Republicans can go after the Democrats is go after the Green New Deal, and that was the Inflation Reduction Act. But if you can, every survey that is done, when they ask people, would you pay extra to save the environment? 75% of Americans say no, they would rather save money. So if you could just write like a single issue bill of, every power company has to use the cheapest electricity. And so Democrats would never go for it, but that's a single issue Republicans can say, and then they can argue, hey, we're going to save you $5,000 a year on electricity bills. But that is a wedge issue that I think the Republicans really can hammer the Democrats on. So I think those are sort of two issues that I think.
Thank you for that, Mr. Saunders.
And then real quick about Musk.
Yeah.
I understand he's got a lot of conflicts with the government, but if you look at it, he's saving money. Like the satellites that are going into space for the Department of Defense, he's doing it cheaper than anyone else. So
Great.
what I would,
I'm not against that. I just want him to
yeah,
disclose it or put it in a blind trust. I'm not against him having
yeah.
government contracts in this unorthodox position, but he can't.
But I mean, if you put his investments in a blind trust, 99% of his investments are just his stock. And so I don't know that a blind trust would actually do what you think it would do. If you want to disclose, that's fine. I don't know how much he can disclose. Military contracts, I would think those are public records. So I think you could go to Department of Defense for that. But so my question to y'all is, shouldn't Republicans be more aggressive against Democrats, that they are in disarray?
Yeah.
And I don't think they're hammering them hard enough. And that I think you're right about President Trump. He's being sort of going after law firms, but he can make it a lot bigger, because if he doesn't, then we're going to lose the House in 2 years and we're back to square one. And all the stuff that Trump is doing now is meaningless.
All right,
And thank you
Reynolds,
for letting me in.
thank you, sir, for joining. Eli, a
Mhm.
lot to respond to there. Take your time and address whatever you wish.
Well, I think you have to ask yourself kind of a deeper question on this, which is, are you, as a Republican or I'm assuming conservative, are you interested in getting the Democrats to move to the right, which might give you consensus on issues that you care about? Or are you interested in trying to destroy the party as we know it? And in some ways, if you wanted to just destroy the party as you know it, you kind of want them to go even further to the left and be even more out of touch with voters. And then the second question you have to ask yourself is, will these tactics that you're talking about end up making much of a difference? Or do you think that we're pretty much, more or less 48, maybe with 4% in the middle that are toss-ups? And I'm not saying I know the answer to those questions, but my general approach would be, I think it's a longer term win for Trump's policies and the things that he cares about most. Let's just start with, his approach in the economy and immigration. If you had a new generation of Democrats that pretty much agreed with him on these issues that even 4, 5, 6 years ago, the party was diametrically opposed on. So I just look at it a little bit differently than just simply like, D's and R's and how many seats you control in the House and so forth. I'm not saying that that's not important. Of course, it's important. But my point is that, what are you trying to get out of it? Because if you have an opportunity to change the center of the conversation, the center of the discourse, then that's how you lock in institutional wins. For a long time, Democrats were able to lock in the New Deal. Democrats were able to lock in, you could argue, the war on poverty, to think of like Lyndon Johnson. And that's how I think how you measure the long-term success of a presidency, not necessarily in sort of the increments of 2-year elections. I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
Reynolds, thank you. I'm going to stand pat on your answer.
Okay.
I enjoyed it, and I want to get other
All
folks in, but thank you for that. Clara, welcome back. Thank you for joining. Glad to see you. Tell us what's on your mind tonight.
Thanks for your patience. Silver Spring, Maryland. I just have two really quick things to say. First of all, I do want to say that I'm no longer a registered Democrat. I switched to independent, and I'm really happy about that. I have a Republican question very quickly and a Democratic question really quickly. My Republican question is this. A few days ago, when the market was especially wobbly, Bessent came out and defended tariffs in an extreme way, I thought, telling people, don't worry about it, it's going to be all right. We have to accept a little pain. Everybody heard that. And what ran through my mind was that if this man keeps this up, he's going to really hurt his career and his reputation with the super rich oligarchs. And I think he is a billionaire. I'm not sure. I think he is. My Democratic question, so I want to know what you think about that, and if you think he'll cave anytime soon or start to hedge. My Democratic question is this. I hear most of the visible spokesmen for the Democrats talking about, quote unquote, winning back the working class. I'm so negative about the Democrats that I promise not to go on and on, but I think that is ludicrous. I think that there are several things that could potentially hurt Trump's approval rating, but losing the working class, I don't think is one of them. Now, a subset, perhaps, of the working class, or the voters anyway, are those who voted for Trump for purely economic reasons. And I think there could be a backlash there. Finally, do you think that the Democrats are assuming that they're going to get all of these economic voters to move to their side if the economy tanks and Trump becomes less popular?
Great, Clara. Thank you. Great to have you back. Thank you for the question. So, Eli, you maybe bundle those up and on what you think is going to happen with tariffs and where you think the openings might be for Democrats on the economy.
I think the tariffs could be an opening for Democrats on the economy because the chances of consumer prices to increase and therefore inflation increasing is very likely based on what we know about tariffs and trade wars in the past. So there's a potential opening there. I think your working class point is a really profound one because the question is so much more complicated and there are more dimensions to it than just simply what the Democrats did for a generation, which is we want to nationalize, we want Obamacare, we want to deal with the health insurance question and delink it to where you work. It turns out that there are a lot of cultural issues as well. And the Democrats are really not in a position to take advantage of those. So I think it's going to be tough bringing back the working class. And they are this kind of party of college educated elites. And so as universities, we'll see what happens. I mean, this is very interesting with Columbia today. If they double down and they become kind of crazier, then that I think does kind of have a little bit of it rubs off on the Democratic brand. So we'll see.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Jack, welcome in. Tell folks
Hello,
where you
Mark,
are.
Eli. Thanks
Hi.
for talking to me.
Yes, sir.
I want to congratulate you. Probably the first venue that I've ever heard that starts putting these, what I consider the obnoxious actions of Trump with some of these law firms. But this goes far beyond Trump. I mean, this was starting, I remember, before he was even sworn in the first term. We had people talking about impeaching him. And as early as the summer of 2017, we actually had a couple of Democrats, Al Green from Texas was one of them, that bought articles of impeachment. This is long before the perfect phone call with Ukraine. And of course, then I think in large part, we may have to thank the New York judicial system for Trump's victory. I mean, if any of these gentlemen in the top row here with their hands raised, if a woman had come in and said, one of them assaulted me sometime in the early 2000s, but I never really fired a police report or had any forensics, they'd laugh about them out of court. And of course, now they're just inviting retaliation. And I wonder if we're finally approaching a point where maybe we may be ripe for a third party, not like we've had in the past where people ran for presidents as spoilers. But I pick up the paper tomorrow and find that 22 governors, 30 senators, 100 members of the House, and numerous locals have joined, call it the American Party. I just see the Republicans and the Democrats pushing to the far extremes, and it doesn't bode well.
Eli.
if we can get a third party, call them the Normiecrats, oh, music to my ears. I mean, I agree with you. It's not because I have to acknowledge, I find Trump at times hilarious. There are elements of him. I also understand him in the context as a populist candidate that Americans have voted twice now for a wrecking ball, and he is a wrecking ball, and that's what the people want, and we have to respect that. I do not have the Trump derangement syndrome. However, I also think he is thin-skinned. I think he, I don't see any of the kind of qualities in his character that would, let certain things go. Why do you have to have everybody, kind of worship you in such an obvious sort of way? So there's elements of his personality, and there's certain things that he's done that I think are not great. But I'm so alienated by a lot of what you described with the Democrats, which I thought was really monkeying around and politicizing, weaponizing what should be these independent institutions that are above politics. And I haven't seen the rethink on that. I'm waiting for it. So please, third party would be great.
Jack, I could talk about this all night, but very hard to get a third party. You need a charismatic leader, and you need to figure out what you stand for that's actually different than the other parties. It's very challenging. Our system is so built by the two parties to reinforce their power. And I think the right person could lead that movement, but figuring out what the party stands for, pro-choice, pro-life, all the dualities, all the binaries. It's very difficult to find a person who has the capacity to survive the attacks that would come if they had any success whatsoever to build what you would need to build a ability to win even a House seat, let alone the presidency of the United States.
That's why I say I think it might have to come from the bottom. I think the last time I'm aware of was with the Whigs, that they had that kind of success. Every other time it's been focused on one individual. And I think
Andrew Jackson's fault for the Whigs
was giving Bill Clinton his victory.
Yeah. Jack, thank you. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being part of the community. Hassan, welcome in. Thank you for coming back. Haven't seen you lately. Grateful for you to join. Tell folks who don't know where you are. I got to unmute again there. You got to hit unmute again. I don't know why I toggled back, but tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
I'm from New York originally. I happen to be in Costa Rica at the moment. And I wanted to say hello to Mr. Lake. I believe you used to work at the New York Sun back in the day.
Correct.
And back in 2008, you did a front page story on me when I was
That's
on the
right.
board.
I do. Now I remember, of course. Yeah.
I was on the board of the Rand Corporation, and we were doing a Middle East board meeting. And we'd gone to Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and we were then in Syria meeting with Bashar al-Assad. And you did a story on why the national finance chair for Hillary Clinton, being me, was meeting with Bashar al-Assad. And I called my secretary and I said, how did he get this information? And she called back and told me she got it from Mr. Brzezinski's office, who you had done a story on the day before, saying, why is Brzezinski, who is Barack Obama's senior foreign policy advisor, meeting with Bashar al-Assad? And so I went down to breakfast the next morning and I said to Brzezinski, did you call the New York Sun and tell them this? And he said, of course I did. When they went after me, I made sure.
You're asking me to reveal my sources from nearly 20 years ago. I can't talk about that.
So he said, welcome to Washington, which I found very amusing.
In fairness, Hassan, I will tell you, I did call the hotel where you were staying to confirm that you were there. I didn't source it. I just want to make that point.
I do know that. And I was there and we did meet with Assad. So, I had nothing to hide from that. So my question to you is, in the old days, I remember you were very focused on Iran.
Yes.
And, many of us have been waiting for 45 years for a change in regime. If you were given the opportunity to speak to the president, what would your advice be to the president relative to what he should do vis-a-vis Iran today?
My advice would be to take advantage of this unknown length of time or window where they don't have air defense systems and they don't have the proxy network that they had before around Israel, and they don't have the ability that they did in 2008 to threaten our serious military assets and take out their nuclear program. And then I would follow that up with a continuation of some of the things that were done in Trump's first term under Mike Pompeo and in his State Department, which had built, I think, a fairly impressive kind of network with just social media users inside of Iran and other people, because I'm convinced that it's been this way for a while. But most Iranians would love to live under a government that wasn't, corrupt and so cruel as the current regime.
Well, I would say to you, the interesting statistic is that the country with the highest percentage of pro-American members of the population is Iran.
Absolutely.
That includes Saudi Arabia, it includes the Gulf countries, it includes Turkey, and it has an implacable enemy in the government of Iran. But the people of Iran are more pro-Western and pro-American than any other population in the Middle East.
100%. And if you talk to Iranian Americans, whether they're in Tehran-Jalis or in South Carolina or wherever, and in my experience, I've talked to many, and I've gotten to know much of the community. They love this country like so many new Americans do. And it's just one of these things that I appreciate Trump on the border, and I think that the approach from the Biden administration was terrible. But I'm worried about some of what I kind of would call nativism, which is to say, I think one of the things that makes America great is the fact that we are a magnet for the world's talent. We're a magnet for people who want to make their lives better, and they make our country better. And I know that's not the most popular thing to say right now, but I just think that is an enduring truth about who we are as a country.
So given Trump's, and I apologize for asking
a
follow-up question, Mark, but given Trump's relative unwillingness to engage in proactive actions that are military in nature, do you think that he would be willing to undertake an action such as what you've recommended?
Yes, I hope. I can't know. I do think there are people in his administration who clearly wouldn't want to do that. And I think that insofar, I don't know what Tucker Carlson is not in the administration, but he is already kind of saying, don't let him get us into a war with Iran. But I do think that J.D. Vance wouldn't want to. But I think that Trump, remember, Trump took out Qasem Soleimani. And not only did he take out Qasem Soleimani, he took out Qasem Soleimani, and everybody said it was a huge disaster. And it didn't turn out to be a huge disaster. So that's a powerful kind of precedent in some ways. One is all the pointy-headed experts who told him he can't do it, they were wrong the last time. And then the other one is that, like, hey, the Iranians tried to kill him, and he knows it. And so I do think I think he would be open to it. I don't know that he will, and I agree with you that he's reluctant, doesn't want to get into foreign wars, but if you did it with Israel, it was just an air operation, and you did the messaging right. You're saying we're not trying to occupy Iran, we're not nation building, but we can't allow Iran to have this nuclear program. I think you could do it now.
Well, your lips to God's ears.
I know, you and me both.
All right. Love hearing from you. Love the conversation between you two experts on this topic. You got to help me out though, because I got in 3 texts. What kind of cigar is that?
Hoya de Monterey Epicure #2.
It's a beautiful piece of machinery.
Hassan, you're living your best life right now, by the way.
Yeah. Great to see you. Thank you for joining, and we always love having you. So please come back. Thank you. Our best to your wife. Eli, thank you for joining. Grateful to you for spending time. Tell everybody again, if they want to read your stuff, hear your stuff, where do they go?
Go to thefp.com. It's just $8 a month, and it's really worth it. We're a great publication. And please subscribe to Breaking History. It is a great podcast, and if you like to dive into history in bite-size pieces, and they're really highly produced. We've got great guests, and I think always interesting topics. So please, it's Breaking History. Subscribe, follow, leave 5 stars, write a nice review. Thank you very much.
All those things.
Okay.
And the free press, again, it's one of the great business and journalistic success stories of the last 20 years. It really is.
I think I agree.
Barry and Eli and everyone there have really built something special, and you should subscribe, and you should not just read their stuff and listen to their stuff, but you should think about the role they've played in changing a paradigm that needed to be changed. It's an incredible story, and people have written it, particularly about Barry, but no one's really captured the importance of what they've done exactly right, I think. And it's a great story just from a story point of view, but it's also really important what they've done and what they're doing every day. So you should subscribe, if only to read Eli's work. You could ignore the rest if you want, although you shouldn't. But thank you again. I would love having you on. I hope you'll come back more often than you have lately. Thank you. Thank you all for watching. A couple things to tell you before we break for the weekend, barring breaking news. First of all, on Monday, on Meghan McCain's happy hour, her guest will be Alex Eisenstadt, who you've seen on this program, great writer for Axios, who's got a new book out, a wonderful guy and super interesting. And also someone who's never been on this show, but should be, Mo Kelly, the radio host. So Megan, Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time, right before this program. Those of you who have not yet sampled Megan's show, please start doing that, including on Monday's episode, and you will enjoy it. And Sean Dan and I, of course, will be back 9 a.m. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time with the morning meeting. And this program will be back on Monday night. And we got some more shows coming, so stay tuned for that. But couldn't be more grateful to you to be part of the two-way community. Thanks to everybody who asked questions tonight, and to Eli, of course, for being on, and to the team that produces this show, particularly Noah and Sam, who produce this show so deftly, direct this show so directly, and the cast of thousands who work at two-way. No, we're a small little operation, but thanks to everybody, and I'll see you Monday. Have a great weekend.